We have the diesel JT in the shop and we are getting ready to upgrade the front end of this thing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these headlights out, this bumper off, the skid plate underneath, and we are going to upgrade those and add a winch. Stay tuned. We're gonna remove this lower skid plate. This is the plastic Rubicon bumper, and this is the steel lower skid plate. So we're gonna get rid of this skid plate. That's going to be 13 millimeter, and there's gonna be 4 of those that hold the skid plate on. All right, where that skid plate was bolted up, we've got 2 brackets that we need to remove. One of them is going to be this lower bracket that had the threaded hole in it, and that's going to be on the inside here with 2 16 millimeter head bolts, and the upper support bracket is going to be out here, and that's also 2 16 millimeter bolts. All right, if you have fog lights, we're going to disconnect the connector here. This is on the passenger side here of the frame, and you just push that tab in and then pull the connector out. There we go. And that's gonna come off with the bumper. All right, on the back side of the bumper, we've got some 18 millimeter size nuts, and there's gonna be 8 of those. So there's 2 on the inside and then 2 on the outside. And we're gonna take those off, all 8 of those. All right, now that we have those bolts out on the back side, you're going to take a screwdriver and just pry up on this little edge of that clip, and you're going to bring it up about 1/2 inch, and then you can pry on the bottom, and that clip will be able to come out. So you've got 2 of those, 1 on each frame rail. All right, once we have all the bolts out and the 2 clips off the frame rail, we can pull the bumper from the truck. We're gonna go ahead and get the LED headlights put in while we're at this point, and then we also need to remove the front camera for relocation into the new bumper. We've got 6 clips we need to remove off the grill. Those clips are very similar to the ones that were in the frame rail, and we're just going to use a screwdriver to pop those out. Since this one has the front camera with the camera washer nozzle, we've got this connection here that you just pinch that and it disconnects it from the hose here. And then the camera wire goes down and it's clipped into the grill, and it's got a connection over here in this corner here. And all you have to do on this one is depress this tab, and you can see it move that little tab right there at the top that locks in to that little tab there. To pull the headlights out, we have 3 10 millimeter screws. So 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. And that assembly will come out and then has 1 connector. You'll want to remove the factory harness from the original front bumper, and that's so that you can retain the connectors here for the fog lights. We are not going to reuse our original fog lights because they're halogen. So we're going to source some good replacement LED. And you can see here they're draped over the frame, the wire for those fog lights. If you're installing the winch mount, you may or may not have these already in your frame, and this particular one does. But if you are installing the winch mount AEV provides these weld nuts or nut certs to go in the frame, but we already have these on both sides. Now that we have everything kind of unpacked here, we are installing the winch mount on ours. The next item though that we're going to install is going to be these toe loop brackets. And you're looking here at the passenger side. So we've got the long bolt with a washer going through the rearmost hole of that toe bracket with a thick spacer. So we've got 4 spacers here. We're going to use the thicker one. And then this right here is going to feed into the frame right there and go like that. But we've got this area right in here where we need to feed 2 of these spacers into. So we're going to do that with a magnet, but these 2 spacers are going to go up in here. That way it will serve as a crush sleeve for the frame there. All right, here's how that should look. We've got the bolt going in from the outside through the toe loop bracket, and then back in here we've got the thick spacer. In the frame we have the 2 sleeves, and then we have the bolt protruding to the inside of the inside frame area of the vehicle. All right, now we're going to bolt the winch plate in. It's going to go in those original holes that were already there for these inside bumper support brackets, and you're temporarily going to pinch those together with a bolt and nut so that this will line up. We'll get the winch plate pulled up in there and get those started just finger tight. And then down here on the bottom, we have our underside support brackets, and they are going to go into the 2 holes that you install the nut certs into this. But remember, ours already had that. And if you've got the optional skid plate, you'll go ahead and attach those skid plate brackets there, and those orient just like that. All right, so we picked up this rigid SR Radiant Series light bar for under the front bumper that's going to go in the skid plate, and didn't want to necessarily get another high power super big light because we're going to have the 2 huge AEV lights on the front bumper. So this one's just going to fill that void in the lower skid plate, but it is just a single white LED. And then it has a backlighting feature, and you can choose which color you want. Well, we're going to do amber, but if you power up the backlighting circuit here, you can see how it's got amber. Now, if you want to change this, all you do is just toggle power, and you can see here we've got green, blue, purple, red, amber, white, and then you keep cycling through, and you're just toggling power. Once you get to the desired color, you just hold it for 2 seconds, and that will store the color that you need in. So anytime we power up now, it should be amber. Whoops, sorry, got mixed up there. All right, so we'll hold for 2 seconds, and then that will store that color in the memory there. So each time we turn on the parking lights, we should have this amber back glow in that lower skid plate. We've got the light bar mounted in that lower skid plate area, and we just tighten these up just enough to where we can still aim it. Probably have to take the skid plate on and off to get that correctly, or exactly where you need it, but you're gonna have that L bracket facing going toward the rear and to the inside of this bolt here. So you'll know once you get in there what you need to do. Before we can put the grill back on, we need to get these headlights addressed, and also too, the winch will prevent the grill probably from coming out, or we think so. So what we've got here is the set of JW Speaker Evo J3 headlights. And these are the ones that have, you know, high, low, and they have the turn signal built into those. Now, these were originally intended for a JK, so we had to get the JW Speaker adapter bezels, which brings this this spacer from a 9-inch light down to a 7-inch light. We've gone ahead and put this one in. Here's what that looks like. So the housing is 2 pieces. The light goes down in the housing, and then you have a bezel that snaps in and has 4 screws around the perimeter that hold it in. Now, since these were originally intended for a JK, they are plug and play for this style. I'm sorry, it's this style connector here. So JW Speaker supplies you this adapter harness for the JL JT, and now we have these 2 that we don't have anywhere to connect them to. Now, in this circumstance, we are going to be changing out some stuff with the fender lights and whatnot. So when we do that, we've got some adapter harnesses that we will show you from American Adventure Lab, and we're going to tie in the turn signal and maybe even the marker light circuit to this light. So we're going to go ahead and get these things put in, and we'll get that camera hose removed. This is the washer hose for that camera. That just unsnaps, and we're going to pinch off the hose on the inside. That way it can reroute to the camera relocation kit from AEV, and we can get this grill put back on. Removing the camera from the grill as well as the little washer nozzle, and this is just a series of clips like this that are push pins, and they go down through the perimeter of the grill and then twist around and then end up right here. So we are taking all of that off, and then now we have a couple of Torx screws up here on the bracket that need to come out. And that houses the camera. And then down here, you can see that little tab down in there on the side of that. We have to depress that to get the camera washer nozzle out of the front of the grill. Grill back on, and really honestly, these lights look just fine. I was under the impression, everybody I've read online says it looks funny with a 7-inch light, but there's only about a 1/2-inch bezel. So it might be a 9-inch light back there, but the only surface area you see might be 8. But I think that looks just fine. Now, one thing to note too, since you have the camera relocation kit on this one, you're gonna have this part right here that just looks like it's kind of out of place. We're just gonna leave it because it's gonna be hidden mostly by the grill guard of the bumper. But AEV gives you a part number where you can replace that grill insert to where it looks like that was never even there. It's now time to bolt the winch up. This is pretty much standard procedure on just about any winch. You're gonna have the 4 bolts here on the bottom that go up through the tabs, and there's square nuts that fit down in the winch feet. So you're gonna go ahead and, in this particular application, go ahead and tighten that completely because we've got the shorter drum of the Evo VR. This is the 12S, and it's gonna give us enough room here on the side to get to the access the bolts and nuts for the front bumper. If you have the Xeon winch, that winch is so large frame, you'll have to leave it loose and shift it from one side to the other and tighten these a little bit later on during the process. The cables are routed up from the bottom, and we've got them zip tied together and then run here to the battery. The diesel model has this last stud right here that has no wiring at all to it, so the winch wire will be the only one attached in that location. And then what we do normally when we run one of these power cables down through some areas that are kind of tight, you can see down in there where that goes by a few metal pieces, we sleeve it with some heater hose just so there's some abrasion resistance there. And then we'll get a picture here from the bottom area as well. All right, those cables run from the winch. You can see them right up in there, and then they run above the sway bar and go up in the hole up there in the top of the picture frame there. And they're gonna go beside the radiator and intercooler and then go up into the engine bay. We pre-assembled some parts here on the front bumper. You've got these little clips that go in for the fog light assembly, depending on which fog light you have. We didn't realize that our fog lights were going to be changed out to be compatible with this particular bumper. We need the LED, but the ones that we have do not have the tabs in the correct location. So these are designed to fit several different models, but the halogen is not the ones that we're going to be using to be compatible with this bumper. So you've got a couple of nut clips that go on right here, and then some little spring locks that snap in from the back side. And you can see how that bracket's attached. And that's going to be for the traditional 4-tab fog lights that we're going to get for this one. But we're going to go ahead and put the main, they call this the main weldment. We're going to go ahead and put that on and see how it fits. You are supposed to have the fog lights in before you install this part of the bumper, but we are just going to go ahead and do some test fitting and get the trail camera mounted up, as well as all the relocation kit for that, in addition to the 2 lights. Here are the components to the camera relocation kit. And then of course we have the camera that we removed from the factory grill, as well as that little washer nozzle sprayer. And that's going to go on the front of this. You can see there's a little tab at the bottom, so you can't really mess it up. Just aim it to where it's facing up. And that snaps in there. And then you can see where the hose goes on the back side. All right, we've got that camera relocation kit mostly assembled. You can see down in there we've got a couple of screws that hold the camera in place. The camera can only go in one spot because of the way the little tabs line up in there. And then of course we've got 2 nuts and bolts on each side. That's a 6mm hex or Allen with a 15 hex wrench on the back side. And you just want to snug those up. They don't have to be super tight, but that turned out and it fits really nicely. So we are going to go ahead and make the modifications for the washer hose to fit on there, and then we will attach this and get it wired up. All right, on the back side of the camera, we've got 4 inches of hose that's on the back of the barb here of the camera. And then, I'm sorry, that's the washer nozzle, but the camera's connected as well. But you've got this little one-way valve. Make sure you put that in the same orientation that it was originally. Otherwise, the sprayer will not work. But we've got this little protective piece around the hose that we pulled off the original. And this curves around the back side of the bumper and then comes into that access hole. They provide you with these Christmas tree zip ties which just snap into these holes. You can see them on the back side here. Sticking out there, and those just look like that on the back side, but we've already got those run down through. And you've got the harness for the camera, the washer hose. Don't get that too tight. See how that one's a little pinched down, but you don't want to pinch the hose to where it can't flow. This one we're going to leave loose for now because we're going to go ahead and do the fitment of the auxiliary lights there and get those put on. We aren't going to bolt the bumper on just yet because I forgot about those fog lights. And they have to be put on, I believe, before the bumper can be bolted up. And we don't have those. So we're waiting on those to show up so that we can continue and get this thing finished up. But let's go ahead and proceed with the auxiliary lighting mounts and get those attached. Here's all of the components to the light mounting kit. So we've got 2 more of these brackets that actually bolt to the underside of the hoop. And then this bracket here is going to go on the back side of the light. And check these things out. These things are, they're massive, but I think they'll complement the look of this bumper. But the bracket is a casting here that replaces the casting that's on the back of the light currently. So this thing is going to go in place of that one to allow this other piece here to hang the light, and it's going to hang the light upside down. So that being the case, we'll have to pop this bezel off and turn it around as well so the light doesn't look essentially like it's upside down. But this is seriously the most legit wiring harness I've ever seen come with a set of lighting. You've got Deutsch connectors on it. You've got a weatherproof, like, really nice relay. It's a Hella relay, really nice looking. And it's got this cool little fuse block. So one for the switch circuit and one for the light circuit. And that's all weather tight. Really nice connections. Kind of cheesy little switch for the type of harness that you're getting. We probably, well, I know we're not going to be using this harness because we're going to be triggering these lights off of our auxiliary switches that came on the truck. So really all we need from this harness is this connection, as well as the lead from it to go under the hood, connect to the factory switches. So I hate to cut it up, but we're going to, and then we'll save the fuse block and the relay for maybe another project on down the road. All right, so to remove this bracket off the back, it's going to be an 8mm. And that should just pop off there. And then right here on these little sleeves, just take you a screwdriver and push those out, and that will pop off the back side. So you've got these two pieces here that will get transferred over to the new bracket. So just on that new bracket, you just want to stick them in there like that, and then push that in the back side. Kind of twist and push at the same time and pinch it together, and then that will go back on just like the old one came off. We've pre-wired the lights. We've got a pigtail hanging out of each side long enough to attach to the light once we get it bolted to these brackets. And then we've got all of the wiring tucked away nicely down through each side. So lights go out to the passenger side, and the camera washer and camera relocation stuff goes out the driver's side. So we now have most of that assembled. We're going to go ahead and put this bezel piece across the side just to get all that finished up. And then on the lights, let me show you what we're going to do there. All right, so on the back of the lights, we've got a T20 Torx bit around the perimeter. Now, I do not have something long and slender enough like with a screwdriver handle to get down into those two, so we can't do that right now, but we're just exploring how this works. I'm assuming all of those come off so that we can get that bezel turned around, oriented correctly. Okay, on the back side of that piece that covers up the bar, we've got studs that need to be installed, and there are 4 of these. They do have that Allen head in the end of them, so we'll just run those in, and then you just want to snug them up. You don't want to get them too tight. Don't want to turn out the little brass inserts in the plastic there. And yes, that is plastic. I wasn't aware of that, but it is. So just snug it up hand tight there. And now those are going to stick through the holes. There's 4 of them in the back side of this. So we're going to just snap that piece on now. Plastic bezel or cover on. And on the back side here, you can see you've just got a little M6 nut that fits on there. That's a 10mm wrench that you'll need for that. So we've got those on, and it turned out pretty nice. So here's how it looks as we are currently. So we've got a few more things we can button up before we wait for those fog lights to come in. We did find a Torx driver to pull those 2 screws out, so we're gonna pull these last 2 screws out and just see what happens here. All right, so let me get something to lift those up out of there with. Oops, that's not good. Let me go grab a magnet. All right, so we'll flip this guy over. And, oh yeah, bezel just pops right off, it looks like. And then hopefully the lens, oh yeah, we're in good shape. So what we're gonna do is just take the lens, turn around, flip it 180. Make sure it fits down in there snug. Yep, that all fits good. And then since the AEV now is facing that direction, we're gonna take the outside bezel and put it back on as well. Now we've got the AEV facing down as well as that, so when they're on the vehicle, they will be oriented correctly. And now we can go ahead and throw all these screws back in. All right, now that we've got the bezels swapped around, we got the cast bracket replaced, went ahead and mounted one of them up. So we've got some Allen bolts that go through with washers, and we did those from the outside in with a 15mm head nut on the back side. We're gonna go ahead and get both of these attached and get those wired up and just maybe hot wire them to the battery and see how they work. We've got the lights and the camera mounted. Hanging out this side over here is just the harness for those lights. And then over here on this corner, we have the camera wiring as well as the hose. So we're gonna leave those disconnected for now because we are waiting on those fog lights. So we'll continue on here later this week once those arrive and keep chugging right along. The rigid fog lights came in this week, part number 37107. These are the amber LED SAE fog lights, so they'll be able to be used on the street legally. They actually come in several different variations. You can see here, you can get them for the one-piece JL JT Rubicon bumper. You can get them for the Sport and the Sport S bumper, and then you can also get them for the 3-piece Rubicon steel bumper. These are this one right here, and they are, again, the amber, so we'll see how that works for a fog light. They've got these adapter brackets, and you're able to aim them a little bit on that bracket, so they will go up and down. We'll be aiming those later on this evening. All right, you can see here we've got the fog lights mounted in there. We didn't have the factory hardware, so we had to come up with these screws that are like a T15, but you can see here how you've got up and down adjustment there a little bit. I'm not sure how we're going to get to those once the bumper is on, but we're going to go ahead and do a test fit and see if we can get access to that. Install the main portion back to the truck, and you're going to have in the top hole the M12 by 35 with a washer, an M12 35 with a washer, and a nut on the back side. And then you're gonna have the smaller of the M12 Allen bolts with a washer and then a nut on the back side. So you're gonna go ahead and install all 6 of those bolts and torque those to 90 foot-pounds. Next, we're gonna grab the center, the front stamping, and then you're gonna put 4 of these, so 2 on each side of those number 8 nut clips, and then down here on the bottom, those are going to be M8. decided to go ahead and finish up some wiring. So these two, the big lights up front, they're going to be wired to our auxiliary switches that came in the Jeep from the factory. And that's the wiring you see right here, zip tied to the winch wiring. And it goes up here, and we've got those two yellow ones that go to the AEV LED lights, to the brown one with the pink stripe, which is switch 1. For now, we're just going to leave all these just kind of tucked right here out of the way, since we're going to come back and add some more accessories. But one thing to note, we sleeved that power cable for the winch with some heater hose, but we're going to go back and put something on this edge right here where it goes across this bracket. We put the zip tie right there to aid a little bit of protection right there, but we probably really need to put something, a piece of rubber over this edge, just to prevent that from chafing in the future as it drives and gets some age and wear and tear on it. We've got the truck out here in the driveway after dark, and we are about, I think, 25, 30 feet away from the garage door, and we have these fog lights aimed. So there's a nice cutoff, and that way when the headlights come on, they kind of bleed out and cover everything. These things are so good. But we've programmed the taser to, when we do the high beams, it keeps the fog lights on. So that's a cool feature of the taser. You can keep the fog lights from dropping out. But for fog, I think we've got a good cutoff. Shouldn't blind any oncoming traffic, and looks really good. All right, now we've got the truck back in the shop, and we're going to finish up this install. So we've got the short corners, which is going to be a lot simpler, I think, than the extended corners. The extended corners go all the way out, even with the end of the fender flare. And since we're going to be getting rid of all this plastic and doing what they call a fender chop kit, we thought it'd look better with the stubby corners. So you're going to throw that on there. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 button head M8 bolts with washers that go in there, and there are nuts welded in the frame underneath that. And then you've got this one here is an M8, I'm sorry, that's M12 35 with a washer, and another one down here. This one goes into a weld nut inside there, but this one's going to get the flange nut on the back side. And for now, we're going to leave this one open. And now that we have those 6 bolts attached here, we're going to go on the back side, and we're going to remove this M10 bolt, which is a 16 millimeter head here, because what happens is we end up swinging up this bracket, and then a longer bolt goes in this place with that remaining spacer bolt. We can go ahead and put the bezel on. There's some tabs right here that slide in the bumper, and then it swings over, and you've got 2 screws that attach right here. Let's go over here to the other side where we don't have that one installed yet. And you can see those 2 tabs. And what they'll do, they'll just lock in to this side over here. And then that swings up, and then we'll put those 2 screws in, and that'll really finish up the corners of this bumper. And I know if you read these instructions, we're doing some of these things out of order. We're just trying to get some stuff off the floor, and we know that we can go ahead and put these on without causing any other problems anywhere else. Should have read ahead while I was outside. What I've done here, I'm going to jumper the light bar temporarily to the fog light circuit just so I can aim that, because before we can swing up the bow shackle mounts and tie in and finish up the bumper, we've got to put the skid plate on. And before we can put the skid plate on, we need to get the light bar aimed and adjusted. So we're going to take it back outside and temporarily just wire that up to the fog light circuit, get the light bar aimed, and as you can see right here, we've got a lot of adjustment there. So we're going to get about 30 feet away from a garage door and get it focused about bumper height on the garage door to be a little bit lower than these big guys up here, because they will light up the night. They're awesome so far. But anyway, we're going to get out there, get that aimed, and then we'll bring it right back in and get the skid plate on and get this thing wrapped up. All right, so we have that temporarily plumbed into the, or wired into the fog light circuit. And I adjusted it down just enough to where the beam would start in front of the vehicle about 6 feet. But then it casts a pretty good amount of light in a spot beam straight ahead. So in addition to the other lights, it's going to be super bright, so excited about that. We've got our winch rope stretched across the garage here, and we're going to go ahead and just do a light spool to get this rope off the ground. We put our Haas Fairlead on there, so that's a 1 inch thick 6061 piece that was machined by Rockman for us. But we're going to go and get this spooled up so we can get that lower skid plate on. And then once we get this thing wound up, we will take it to the shop, and we've got a good hill to wind it up under load. Now that we've got those end caps on, the winch rope spooled up, the lights are all wired up, the only thing we have left to do is wire up this, and I don't have any wiring here at the house to get that put up there. We're going to run that off the same auxiliary 1 switch, and then the backlighting circuit, which is this white wire, will get tied into the parking lamp circuit. But we've gotten some more done here. On the bottom, you should have the M8 nut clips in 4 locations, as well as underneath the skid plate support bracket on each side. So there's one back here, you just can't see it. And then we've got these 2 in here. So that means we've got everything on the winch plate tight except for this one big pivot bolt where those 2 sleeves are, and that's going to be for this thing to swing up and attach, but we're going to be pinching the skid plate in there. So we're going to get the skid plate put on now, and that's going to be 4 across the front and then 2 on the back. Now that the skid plate's on, we've got that one 8mm bolt with the 13mm head going up through the bottom. And then through the front, we're going to take the other remaining M12 bolt, which is this one with the Allen head, and you'll get it started in there, and then get a nut on the back side, which is kind of hard to get to. What you can do is possibly put a wrench. We'll run it in there a little bit further. Yeah, just put it on the end of a wrench here and feed it up in there. Might end up having to tape it. Oh, there we go. All right, so you can see it's going in a little crooked, but that's okay. It's not threading into a nut that's already welded in. We're just putting the nut on the back side of it. So we've got that one started. And then here on the back side, where that swung up, we used to have a bolt going in the side. Now we're going to put the spacer in here and this longer bolt on the side support bracket here. And sometimes you might have to find something to pry a little gap open right there, but you can usually tweak it just a little bit, enough to get it in there. So there we go. And just kind of wiggle and push. Maybe grab a screwdriver. That way we can line up this hole. Maybe tap it a little bit. There we go. And all we're doing is lining up the spacer with that bracket in that hole. And then there we go. We've got that last 10mm started in the side. And that one's going to have a 17mm head. So now we're able to tighten the Allen head, the 17 right here, and then the big 19 had the 2 crushed sleeves inside. So we'll get those 3 tightened, and then finally we'll be able to get these skid plate bolts tight. There's 6 of those. So we'll go ahead and get that done, and she'll be ready, other than our last thing of wiring up the light bar on the bottom, which we'll have to do tomorrow when we get some wire for that.